Well, welcome back, everybody. Hey, how's it going? I made plenty of videos about alt-left, alt-right, but it's been a while since I've done a video like this where I don't know. Hold on, just a second. This is important. Not really. But we're gonna pretend. But I wanted to say before I really began in on this is that I in no way feel that Ben Shapiro is a part of the alt-right. And in fact, there are things that Ben Shapiro says that I actually agree with, believe it or not. I think what Ben Shapiro does as far as the alt-left goes is a good thing. I really do. But some of his stuff is, I don't, like, some of it is too conservative, I'd say. I wouldn't say that he's an alt-right person. He's not an alt-right person at all. He's a traditional right-leaning person. So, there are things that I do agree with him on, and even like on certain aspects of the topics that I will be going over. There are things within those topics that he will argue for that I actually would say, yeah, okay, I can see that. But I'm going to stick to the simplicity of it for the sake of simplicity. All in all, I would say that since it's not alt-right, I'm not alt-left, this would be what I would say is a traditional, classical left versus right kind of interaction. Something that I am used to seeing when I was a teenager, a rebellious little shit of a teenager. But anyway. Damn it, I hate those but anyways. Fucking roll the clip, the first one. Shit.
Neutral that should be supported by conservatives is because it is a better solution to a lot of what we're seeing on the.
Do you believe abortion is the same as murder? Do you believe women who get abortions, even when their lives or the child's life isn't in danger, should be put on trial for murder? Yes or no?
I think abortionists should be put on trial.
But I mean,
I don't think that women should be put on trial for a couple of different reasons. So the first reason is because I don't think that it is effective in deterring abortion to put women on trial for the killing of the unborn. The second reason is because I think that we in our society have unfortunately gotten to such a point that an entire generation has been indoctrinated to believe, particularly an entire generation of women, since that's what we're talking about, have been indoctrinated to believe that a baby is a polyp, and so when they remove it, I'm not sure there's the actual mens rea necessary, the actual criminal intent necessary for a prosecution. So when we're talking about, the typical pro-life position here has been that the woman is a victim in abortion nearly as much as the baby is. That there's an entire abortion industry that is geared toward teaching women that babies are not babies, and that getting a baby aborted is in fact a betterment of their life. So no, I'm not in favor of prosecuting women for abortions.
But I mean, there are a lot of women who do have the intent, right? Like if a woman goes to an abortion clinic, they are ordering the murder of their child, in your opinion, like what you would say.
Well, again, so I gave you two reasons. One, a public policy one, and one, like, you'd have to show me. You really have to show me the case of a woman who went in there and said, "I know this is a baby, cut its brains out." If that's happening, then that is infanticide. I mean, that's like, wouldn't you acknowledge? I mean, if a woman walked in with a baby that was 1 day old and said, "Here's my baby, kill it," wouldn't you put her on trial? But that's not what we're talking about. In the vast majority of abortions, the truth is, unfortunately, that women don't actually believe they are killing a child. They actually believe they are killing something that is non-human and is the same thing as removing a tumor or something.
So, but are you saying that you don't think abortion is murder then? Because there are.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the vast majority of women who obtain abortions don't think that abortion is murder. And intent is a fundamental element in any criminal prosecution. I feel horrible for women who have abortions. I think that it's terrible for them. I think it's a lot worse for the baby.
Right,
obviously.
But what's key is, like I said, a vast majority, right? There are women out there who know.
All right. I've done the abortion thing before just for the fuck of it, but before we go on, I'd just like to point out, see, this is just regular conservative right wing, and so this will be a classical left versus right. Can we roll the classical music, please? Do we have classical music that's copyright royalty free? I don't know if we have that. I don't know if I have that. If you heard classical music at that point, then I have it. But if not, then I didn't. So no, no. I, as a liberal, this is another thing I want to address too. Yeah, is on Prager University, they have a video about the alt-right where they keep saying that the alt-right is about separation of races and stuff like that, and they keep saying that the left, it's just the left, does too. No. We need to make that differential abundantly clear, that there's a difference between the alt-left and just being a normal, regular liberal, okay? So, I just had to get that out of the way. But Ben Shapiro, no. Fetuses are not viewed as polyps or cancer. The thing, and you wouldn't understand, I guess, because you're just not a fucking atheist, and you don't view things in scientific terms, but looking at a fetus, what was it? The trimester I said that they aborted it at before it starts resembling a human being. Yes, the heartbeat starts within like a week or some shit like that, but the thing that we look at is that what we're aborting is a clump of cells. It doesn't actually resemble a human being at all. I don't feel guilty about getting rid of I don't feel guilty about abortion when this is something that does not have a frame of consciousness. It doesn't know that it's alive. Like, once it starts taking more human form and you go further on in the trimesters, yeah, I can understand not aborting it, but I think putting abortion, doctors who perform abortions on trial for murder is extensive. And the thing that he's not looking at is that you're not going to, I don't know, you're not going to be able to stop abortions by making them illegal either. We know that for a fact, because they used to be illegal and women were trying to do them anyway. So we know this. That's actually part of the reason why we legalized them, is because the practice was being done unsafely, and we wanted to be able to do it safer through regulation. I know you're for small government and you hate that fucking word, regulate, but by making it legal so that it can be used in the profession of medical science, we can create parameters and everything to make sure that it's done healthy and safely. And no, it's not it's not viewed as cutting out a tumor or a polyp. Jesus. Most women who go through an abortion, I would say it's a difficult decision no matter what the circumstance is. All right? I feel like I should find a picture of a devil child growing inside of a woman's womb to be able to put this across to certain religious people. If I showed you a picture of a devil child growing in a womb, and the woman came in and said, "Oh my God, Satan is growing inside of me, some kind of evil demon thing," would you say no to aborting that? Or furthermore, let me take it to a more medical aspect. What if you knew that the baby was going to be a stillborn, or that it was going to come out, it was going to live for 2 minutes, then die? What is worse? Aborting that, or letting it live 2 minutes just so it can die? I'm just saying, there are practical applications out there for abortion. It's not all shitty and diabolic as you make it out to be. And no, it's not like, take it out, I don't care about it, whatever. I'm sure there's some women, some that do that. But not the entire population of women. I think that's an absolutely absurd proclamation to make. And I mean, there are just certain, like, I mean, there are certain applications, like things that I think about too. It's like, there are women that get pregnant where they're like, it's an oopsie. And you know what you're going to say is, no, well, I don't know that you're going to say, but I imagine you would say, well, there shouldn't be oopsies. You're not supposed to have sex till you're married, blah, 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 blah. But life happens. We are at the mercy of nature and human nature. And I don't believe there is a fucking God. I think this is it. This is what you get. We are at nature's mercy. Nature is the one and only true dictator that we have to answer to. We have to conform to the laws of physics, the laws of nature. And part of the laws of nature is that we want to fuck and reproduce. You can't stop it. You can't. I mean, unless you want to go around spaying and neutering children. I don't think you would want to do that. But people are going to fuck. They're going to reproduce. Sometimes it's an irresponsible decision, or not even a decision. Sometimes it's an oops. And in which case, like, you have to look at certain scenarios, like if the person's homeless, they have no money, they're addicted to drugs, they've got all kinds of diseases, and they just don't want to bring a child into that world, and they don't even know who the father is your answer to send them off to child services and adoption care and a system that has been shown time and time again, and even the people that work for it and work within that system will tell you it doesn't work. People who go, the kids who go through foster care, half of them are in hell. And I could produce examples of that, but I don't want to. I'll give you anecdotal instead. There's a particular member of my family who has like 2 different fathers, 3 different children. She abandoned them in a trailer park. And now they're going through the foster system where they currently reside in a house that has bullet holes where drive-by shootings are constantly a thing. That's the foster care system at work. So I guess that's better than having to abort them, and I would have to say yes to that because I know them and I care about these kids. But I can't blame a woman who's in a situation where they're going to bring a kid up that's going to end up in foster care to say, no, I don't think this is any life for them to have, and say no. But then again, you know, you're also talking to a person that doesn't believe in a consciousness that is eternally lasting. We die, and that's it. And I would rather die before knowing what consciousness is to be afraid to get rid of it. Just saying. It seems like after a child is born, we don't give a shit about it, but when it's inside somebody's womb, it's the most important thing fucking ever. We can wage wars and kill people and thin out populations that way, and that's just fine. A cognitive being, somebody who's cognitively aware of their own consciousness, we can do that, and that's okay. But killing something that has no concept it's alive, that's wrong. That's just oh so horrible. But yeah, I would agree with you, taking a child, a born child out of the womb to a doctor and saying, you know, scramble its brains. Yeah, that's infanticide. I would agree with that. But we're not talking about infanticide. We're talking about aborting a clump of cells. We're talking about a zygote. We are talking about something that looks like a worm. Go look at what the fucking fetuses look like. Seriously. I can't feel guilty about it if it's going to grow up in hell. This is essentially heaven and hell right here is your existence on earth and what you make of it. And after you die, you're done. So from that perspective, could you possibly understand like I'm talking directly at him and like he's ever even going to see this video. But could you possibly understand under that circumstance? I don't know. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Whatever. Next video.
Is never going to recognize that broken families are a problem because it is one of the goals of the left to break families. Historically speaking, if you read Marx and Engels, they do not like the traditional family. They think the traditional family is a bulwark against an overarching brutal state, right? So the idea, and they want the overarching brutal state, so therefore they don't want the family. The family is a bunch of people who care about each other more than they care about the community at large. And so this is why in Soviet Russia, the chief goal was to separate children from their family, have them turn on their parents. I mean, some of the great Soviet heroes in the Soviet Union were kids who reported their parents to the authorities. Right? So the left has never been in favor of traditional families. They see it as a threat because traditional families don't vote according to how the left wants them to vote. They vote in favor of leave me alone. I've got my family. It's my job to protect them. So the left is never going to stand up in favor of that to the detriment of everybody involved. And therefore, it's incumbent on particularly religious people, because religion still has a significant amount of weight in American life, unlike in Europe. It's incumbent on religious people to make sure that their kids understand the value of family. It's incumbent on secular thinkers to make clear to people that broken homes, that single motherhood is not an affirmative good. And when Hollywood tells these lies, a great book by Charles Murray it's called Coming Apart, and it's actually about white poor people, white poverty versus white wealth. And he says one of the problems is a lot of people who exist in the white wealthy sphere, people in Hollywood, they live like traditionally religious people, but they preach like far leftists. So they'll be married, they'll have kids, they'll have the same divorce rate as kind of normal folks, but then they'll preach that all families are created equal. And look, this is not to say there can't be great single moms. There can. It's not to say there can't be crappy two-parent homes. Of course there can. But on a general level, if you are born into a two-parent family, you do have an advantage over people who are born into a one-parent family. It is everybody in this room's responsibility to live out these ideals, teach them to your kids, and teach them to all the people around you, regardless of race.
I'm going to hold off on my retort to this one because it falls in line with, like I said, there's a lot of things that Ben Shapiro does say that I do actually agree with, but these things, no. These things I'm like, ugh. But there's a bigger statement behind this family values issue that I have a problem with, so I'm going to go ahead and show the next video about the gay marriage thing. And I'm not going to do the fancy effects, I'm just going to show it.
As far as the secondary argument about, let's take the predicate that government is now involved in marriage. Yeah. Should government subsidize gay marriage and straight marriage the same way? My answer is no, because the only purpose for the government getting involved in marriage is the procreation of the next generation and the raising of that generation. And it's my belief that a man and a woman do a better job of raising a child and producing children, obviously biologically, than two men or two women.
All right. So, traditional family values, I don't understand why the religious folks are so up in arms about this. They really flip shit about this kind of stuff. And you know, like, I can go out there and find plenty of examples of single parent households where the child does just fine. I do see a disadvantage, especially if you're in poverty. It's really hard. But the more you climb up on the social scale of class, the easier it really becomes. I've known plenty of... Actually, I knew a girl when I was younger who was being raised by only her father because her mother died from breast cancer. And she grew up with a doctorate. She's doing just fine. So I don't know what all this family value shit is about. I think it's important for parents to be there for their kids. Absolutely. I think a fostering environment is one that is filled with love and compassion. I've had many parents tell me, I've heard this being said, is that the one job that a parent has to do is to never stop loving their child. And honestly, like, it's been shown that children who grow up in environments that do not foster a healthy mental environment, like abuse, neglect, things like that, can actually exacerbate genetic lines to having mood disorders like bipolar, schizophrenia, sociopathy, and so on and so forth. But when they grow up in a nurturing, fostering environment, whether that be one parent, two parents, or even if they're the same sex, that child can drastically change the child's ability to manage those mood disorders, and even can stifle them so that they're not as bad as they would have been otherwise. This has been shown in multiple psychological studies across the board. But a big problem I have is with this whole gay marriage thing. And one of the points that he brings out in gay marriage of why he doesn't agree with it is because, well, gay people don't procreate. Well, that's not entirely true. There are gay men that don't come, that especially within older generations when it was not okay to come out of the closet at all, that married, had a child, later on said, I totally cannot go down on puss anymore, can't do it, started fucking men behind the woman's back, came out of the closet, the woman goes, yeah, I kind of figured that out a long time ago. Sometimes it's not that easy, sometimes they don't separate that, but I mean, that goes without saying. I think that's just common sense. I think you figure that out on your own. Some are pretty pissed, I imagine. But the thing is that, you know, they go into a relationship with another guy, or even a female for that matter. Not the guy, but, you know, like female, male relationship, but they had a child from a previous relationship because they didn't want to come out of the closet and admit to themselves who they were. That is, especially in older generations, that is a thing. I see that coming, that probably not being the case less and less now that homosexuals can come out of the closet and not be shamed for it like it used to be. It used to be a bad problem. So I see that being less of an issue, but still, you know, you have surrogacy, and you have sperm donations. These are things that gay couples do, and they do raise children. And I even brought up some statistics. I will have plenty of links down in the description below, by the way, so you can go and look at all this stuff. I left the links to the Ben Shapiro clips, so you can watch the entire things. Be careful, some of them are quite long. Well, I think the two that I have are really short, but there's one that's like almost 2 hours. But I went to several sites and found these statistics. So we have this one in 2011. I know, fuck 2011, but the studies just get better and better. I promise you. Like, I looked through a lot of different things, but in 2011 there were the Australian census accounted for 4,000 same-sex couples that had dependent children living with them, and about 33,000 in America. And out of all of them, they looked at the mental well-being, their home life, and all sorts of different aspects, and come to find that they're fine. They're absolutely fine. Kind of going on that this thing is kind of bullshit. And then I also have this. In January, researchers from the Columbia Law School examined 76 studies published after 1985, and found that only 4 of them concluded that children raised by gay couples faced additional adversity as a result of having same-sex parents. To be considered, each of the studies had to meet established guidelines that accounted for credibility and relevance. I have also included a PDF file from the Williams Institute research about this. And every single one I can find, every single research that I've done, that I've found on same-sex couples raising children, not a single one of them could find it to be this dreadfully, like, horrible thing for the child. So anyway, after making this video, I came to a realization. I did a lot of thinking about this. one of the biggest arguments or issues that I have with the arguments that Ben Shapiro makes is thus as follows. He makes the argument about gay marriage in multiple interviews with himself, where he's talking about little government, small government politics, and the way that he sees it is that gay marriage should not be legal, but just heterosexual marriage in general shouldn't be something that's recognized by the government, and that's all well and good. But he made the comment that he didn't want to see a gay couple being married in his synagogue. And he does make the proclamation too that we should live in a society where you do your thing, I do my thing. You don't have to like what each person does, but you have to recognize that this is a part of the world you live in, and they have a right to do their thing even if you don't like it. This is an argument. Basically, the principle behind that is tolerance versus acceptance. We want to live in a tolerant society. We don't necessarily have to accept, and that's something that I totally agree with him. But I don't think that he's being entirely tolerant at all. I think he's being extremely intolerant. And I mean, even if you remove the government's position from marriage in its entirety, I still have a point to make there. But first, let me say this, is that the fighting for the right to get married in the gay community has a pretty good reason, for legal reasons. And I would think as a lawyer, he would know that. There are legal reasons why, and honestly, from my perspective, I could give a shit if a religious institution doesn't want to recognize a marriage between two people of the same gender. I really don't care about that. The point and purpose is that the state, the federal government, recognizes that two people are together for legal practicalities. That's the issue there. And there's also some humane issues that go along with it. Like just because you disagree with somebody or you don't care about the way that they have their lifestyle is not a reason or an excuse to treat them like a secondary class citizen. You can't do that. I mean, Mr. Shapiro is a Jew. That doesn't mean that people who are neo-Nazis get to deprive him of basic human rights and civil liberties, or make it illegal for him to exist. I mean, you can't do that. You can tolerate his presence, but you cannot, you don't have to accept it. And this goes back to what I was saying, is that, okay, even if the government didn't have control over marriage or have any say-so over marriage, the issue with it is that if your congregation, if your church, if the institution that you belong to decides to recognize marriage between same-sex couples, I think it is completely intolerant of you to say that you don't want, you cannot want to see it, but to just outright say that it can't happen and shouldn't happen is entirely intolerant. I would say that if your synagogue is going to perform a gay marriage, either you can find another synagogue that won't recognize gay marriage, or quite simply, you can just not go. And honestly, somebody who's a theologian with such restrictive views as you probably wouldn't be invited anyway, because you would just, crash the party. You'd be a party pooper. So I don't understand why you can't look the other way. I don't understand why you can't go. I don't understand why you couldn't find a synagogue that wouldn't recognize gay marriage. I don't know why you couldn't do that. To me, that just sounds intolerant. And the issue that I have with that is it starts wading through the murky water of authoritarianism, of saying that because I disagree or disapprove of something, they shouldn't be able to do certain things in life, or they shouldn't be viewed as respectable citizens in society because they are not within the moral standing that I find to be acceptable. That is very, very authoritarian. Like I said, in our society, we practice tolerance, but that doesn't mean that you have to accept. So that means that, like neo-Nazis, they don't accept somebody who is Jewish, but they have to tolerate them, because you can't take away that person's rights just because you don't agree with them. That's the issue I have, and it goes back to the philosophy that I pointed out before of choices and not the ability to inflict one's will on others against their will, against their own will. And that's the problem that I have with it, is that you don't have to accept gay marriage. You don't have to accept homosexuality in general, but the thing is that in a free society, you have to tolerate it. You don't have to accept it, but you have to tolerate it. And the moment you stop tolerating it, and the moment you start saying, these things just can't be done because I said so, you've officially stepped into the realm of authoritarianism. And while there are many aspects, many arguments that Ben Shapiro presents that I do agree with, this is one that I just fundamentally will never agree with. Anytime I see legislation being passed, if it's taking away rights or liberties, I have to question why. Well, first I have to question: does the law give people rights and liberties? Such as, the law saying that gay people can get married. You can't discriminate against that. That's giving a group of people rights and liberties and freedoms. Now, if you pass a piece of legislation that prevents people from doing things or takes away rights, liberties, and freedoms, I would have to ask why. And if the answer, like for instance, legislation that keeps people from being authoritative towards other people would be a prime example of legislation that I would approve of. Such as, I approve of legislation saying that you are a criminal if you knowingly transmit HIV to another person. That should absolutely be a crime. And rape, molestation, things like that is inflicting your will on another person against their own will. And yes, there is an element of responsibility that comes into this. Like, I know he really, really hates the idea that there's same-sex couples out there taking care of children, but I mean, this is very authoritarianism, and I don't think it's the government's place to come into our homes, tell us how we can fuck, tell us who we can fuck, tell us whether or not we can or cannot have children, and be very, very specific on how we raise them. I mean, granted, there's a limitation to that. Like if you're locking your child up in the closet and telling them they can't have anything to eat, well, that's an authoritarian thing that I would see legislation is around to put that person behind bars for a reason. But just because two people are the same gender and they decide to have a child together, I don't think it's the government's business to come in and say that they are terrible parents just because they are the same gender. I think that's an absolutely horrific and awful idea. It is very authoritarian. And while Ben Shapiro is not a part of the alt-right, some of these things that he goes into are very much in line with that type of thinking that the alt-right has. And I think he should probably try practicing what he preaches. Is That is one thing that I would say, if he could take anything away, it's practice the concept of tolerance and not acceptance. And even if the government wasn't involved in marriage, understand that even if a church reconciles their very archaic views of marriage and says, okay, we're going to start marrying same-sex people, then, like I said, you can find a synagogue or a church or whatever that doesn't practice that or won't acknowledge that, or you can look the other way and not attend. That's your choice. That's up to you. But to say that the churches get to decide based on what your philosophy is, on what your theological principles are, is absolutely absurd. Another thing I'd like to point out is things like Planned Parenthood. Yeah, I'm not in favor. I will never ever be in favor of taking a doctor who has performed abortions to court and sentencing him for murder charges. I will never be in favor of that. And granted, yes, there are people that take, like, for most of the women that go to Planned Parenthood for an abortion, it's a difficult decision. Most women, it's a very difficult decision, I would say. You have a few people, but unfortunately, you cannot stop people from being irresponsible. The only thing you can do is hold them accountable. Just like two parents that are terrible parents that would lock their child in a closet and not feed them deserve to go behind bars. I think that it is deeply irresponsible for a woman to go into Planned Parenthood once every few months where the abortion clinic knows them by name and face. Again, tolerance, not acceptance. But I would just have to say that it's important to be careful to not step into the boundary of authoritarianism. This is something that was just bouncing around my head all day, and it was bothering me, and I had to put it in there to let it be known. Thank you. So yes, by all means, like, I agree that we should live in a society where you do what you want, and I may not like it, but fuck it, do your own thing. I'm gonna do my own thing. But the issue that I have is not that churches recognize. I don't care about a private institution recognizing two people together. My interest in it was for power of attorney issues and stuff like that. Is recognizing, like, the state recognizing that these two people are together. Because the way that we live right now is that if they don't, there's ramifications for that. Not necessarily legal ramifications, but there are negative ramifications for the state not recognizing two people being coupled together. So that is the thing. I'm not a very orthodox person, so I don't it's like I don't really care, but I understand why people want to get married. I understand the reasoning behind it, and you can't say that it's because that gay people shouldn't because they can't rear children, because some of them do have children and offsprings so that the government can come in and help adopt them into society. Just because they are born from two gay people, or born from a gay person, maybe even like one of them has the genetic similarities or whatever, that doesn't mean that they're going to be gay. It doesn't mean that they're going to be trans. It doesn't mean that they're going to have gender identity all confused. Yes, there have been some families that have done that, and those people are terrible, and they need to stop confusing their child and raise them like a normal human fucking being. So, I mean, these are things that exist. So this whole traditional family values thing, well, maybe maybe your idea of what a traditional family value thing is invented by human beings and not necessarily indicative of what happens in the natural world. Just saying. There are plenty of homosexual parents that participate in adoption, and I would say that that's not a terrible thing either. As long as they're going to good homes, because whether they're homosexual or heterosexual, it doesn't matter. What matters is they go to a good home where they will be safe and they will be in a nurturing environment. That's the important thing, is that the parents are there. Not whether or not they're different genders or the same gender. That doesn't matter. Oh well, fuck it. I will not be having children. Don't want them. I don't want kids. I'm not a fucking role model. I like being rustic. It's my thing. But at least I'm being a responsible rustic and not raising children. I don't know. That's one thing that bothers me the most about Ben Shapiro, is that he is so stuck on these traditional Victorian ideals of family values, that you get married, you pop out a kid, that's the only time you pop out a kid, and the only time you have sex is for procreation. And even if love and the flame and everything has gone completely out, you just have to do it. I'm not so sure that that's a good idea. I don't know if that's even healthy for the kid. I mean, I've seen some pretty, like, he pointed out in one of the videos that he's seen, like, couples that don't have their shit together, like maybe they're heroin addicts or meth addicts taking care of kids, and this is just not a good idea. It doesn't turn out well. Yeah, that exists, but I mean, like, I would agree just as much as you that they probably should not, like, that's a bad situation for the kid. But I don't think that you can keep going on about, like, I think, like, if a kid is growing up with a single parent, if that parent is good to the kid and raises them well, who are we to judge? And I think that's the biggest problem here, is you're being very, very judgmental. And ultimately, I think this is an ideal or concept that the left and right will probably never see eye to eye on. I look at it from a rational perspective, not a religious perspective, of as long as the child is being taken care of, then I have no quarrels with it. I really don't. I just don't. I don't care if it's a single parent. I don't care if they're homosexual or heterosexual. That doesn't matter. What matters is the nurturing, fostering environment to support healthy physical and mental growth. And that's why I would never raise a child. I love nicotine, and I'm just not going to go into it. I'm rustic. We'll leave it at that. Bohemian, whatever you want to call it. And I enjoy it. So I don't want a kid, because that would just get in the way of me living the lifestyle I want to live. And on top of it, like, I wouldn't want to raise a kid. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm horribly in poverty. Like, I'm not eating ramen noodles every day, but I would not want to raise a kid in the income bracket that I'm in. I think that would be bad for I just don't want to. I wouldn't recommend any parent. Well, I guess some parents do want to do that. They just want to have a kid. They want to see perpetuate their genetic cycle over and over and over again, which is natural. I'm rambling, but you get the point. I'm just appalled at the just family values, and it would be so nice if the world was so picturesque and perfect and worked so orderly as to the way he thinks it should, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't. So sometimes kids end up being raised by one parent. So now sometimes they might maybe end up raised by, well, let me put it to you this way. Would you rather have a kid be raised by meth heads that make minimum wage and live in a motel that, you know, they don't even know what the word hygienic means at all. And or would you rather them grow up in a upper middle class household with two parents that are the same sex? I'm going with the upper class parents that are the same sex. So, is it traditional family value? No. But it's a lot healthier than the alternative that I just described. So, maybe there are exceptions to the rule. I don't know. I know I'm sure there are people on the right that will agree with me on that. I know there might even be people on the left that disagree with me. But I think most people watching with this video are going to be like, yeah, I don't have a problem with it, whatever. Well, but let me know what you think in the comments section below. Like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the bell button. And with that, I'm out.